Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope that everyone is having a great day. I hope that everyone has had a great week thus far. So anyway guys, I was busy reading Revelation, right? This was part of my reading plan. And essentially I was reading it, and sometimes when I do these videos, when I come across certain pieces of scripture, it's not that it hasn't necessarily stood out to me. It's just that I maybe didn't look at it that deeply. And so, sometimes we read the word and then we think, well, oh, I know what this means. I get it, kind of. And we don't necessarily look too much further into it. But this particular scripture, there was just a prompting for me to look further into this particular word. And I feel like this is going to speak to someone, if not two people, hopefully more, so that, they are pointed towards God and God answers them on something that they've been asking him. But anyway. So the verses that stood out to me was Revelation 3, verse 5, 12, and 21. And this is what it reads. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. So this is what it says. Verse 5 says, "He who overcomes will, like them, be dressed in white. I will never blot out his name from the book of life, but will acknowledge his name before my Father and his angels." Okay, that was verse 5. And now verse 12. What verse 12 says is, "Him who overcomes will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name." Okay, that was verse 12. And then verse 20, 21. So what verse 21 says is that, "To him who overcomes, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne." Okay, so like I said, this stood out to me, and the word that stood out to me there was, drum roll please, overcome, of course. And I've heard the word before, and I just had my own assumptions as to what it meant. But so I went to go and look further into this, and especially because when I looked at the word overcome, I realized that it wasn't referring to Jesus. Firstly, because this piece of scripture is addressing, this person who's writing the scripture is addressing the people in this church. And so he's saying that, look, him that overcomes, I will not blot out of the book of life. And so this is why I'm like, okay, so to overcome is important, right? Anyway, so I looked it up, and what came up was this Greek word that you spell almost like VLKAW, which I would say sounds a bit like Lekau, something like that. And this means to conquer, to overcome, and prevail. And of course, this is thanks to the Logos Bible software. But anyway, so that was the definition, right? Anyway, so then the following verses along with that came up as well in light of that definition. The first piece of scripture was 1 John 4, verse 14. Now, it didn't come up in this order, but I just thought, okay, let's flush this out in terms of overcoming, how this sort of feeds into each other. For us to understand it, and for us to be for us to further understand what it means to truly overcome. Okay, so the first scripture is 1 John 4, verse 4. And what it says is that, "You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world." Now, who is he that they are referring to? The one who has overcome, right? So that takes us to John 16, verse 33. And what this says is the following: "I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." So it's Jesus, right? Jesus has overcome the world. And now that we know that Jesus is the one who overcame, this takes us to 1 John 5 from verse 4 to 5. This is essentially what it says. It says, "For everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith." And so this obviously speaks to our faith then, right? But now in verse 5, what it says is this: Who is it that overcomes the world? Only he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. So essentially, when it comes to the word overcome, all of these scripture explains it. And the person who initially overcame the world is Jesus. And so through him, we obviously have that privilege, the privilege of overcoming. And you know what's interesting to me is that what it says in Revelation in that verse 5 is that he who overcomes will like them be dressed in white. I will never blot out his name from the book of life, but will acknowledge his name before my Father and his angels. So it almost means as though, like, when it comes to the book of life, by the way, guys, it basically just means the book where God has written the names of those who are going to go to heaven. And so what's interesting is that it says blot out the name, which means that the name was already in the book. And this is what I'm assuming. The name was already in the book, which means that it's going to essentially erase that person's name out of the book, meaning that person won't be in heaven anymore. But that also means that the person's name was there already or has been there before. And the way you almost like stay in the book, I would say, is by overcoming. And how do we overcome? Through these verses that I read, right? The answers in these verses. Now let's flush this out a bit more. So essentially, the person who overcomes is he who is not taken over by the world, as they will experience all of these things that God says, right? And in order to do that, we need to have faith in Jesus, recognizing that he has already overcome the world, and that through him we can do the same. The key word there is can, because we can choose not to want to overcome the world through Jesus, even as someone who claims to be Christian, and we can choose to do that, to overcome through Jesus. And when we choose to do that, we need to take up our crosses and follow him. And last time I checked, the cross that Jesus carried was not light, it was heavy, which means that there are going to be things we are going to have struggle, and everything is not going to be smooth sailing. So the boat can still get caught in a storm, but reaching out to Jesus will help us overcome, or rather get through the storm instead of being overcome by it. Thereby, we will be written in the book of life and have a royal seat awaiting us. So guys, let's access the overcoming capabilities of Jesus through Jesus, and in the end, let's make God proud. Because overcoming the world, not giving into our fleshly desires, not giving into those things, and not being overcome by it, but overcoming the world through Jesus Christ is what was going to make God proud. And let's do that. Let's all attempt, and let's all do our best to make God proud. But anyway, guys, that's it for today. I hope that this encouraged you. I hope that this blessed you. And I hope that you have a great day further. I hope that you have a great week further. And God bless.